Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a good day and a great start to this week. I want to continue my March Mystery Madness discussions, particularly now the brackets are out, with Trinidad and Noir, the Classics, an absolutely phenomenal collection of short stories and a couple of poems that is a totally immersive book. It spans 90 years of stories and poems. The earliest work is from 1927, and then we have a few more that are from the period where Trinidad and Tobago are colonies still. Then there's several stories from the beginning years of independence, and then about 8 or 9 stories from the past 30 years. The most recent work being published in 2015. And so it really is, it's immersive. It shows 90 years of change in terms of the history of Trinidad, how the culture, the economy are shifting, but it's intensely readable, very enjoyable. And so I highly recommend this book. The other thing that it really highlights and accomplishes well, I think, is it shows just how astonishingly diverse the culture is within Trinidad. How there are a number of cultures that have maintained cultural traditions spanning centuries, you know, African cultures and indigenous American cultures. But also how there has been some really interesting aspects of cultural fusion, including not just European cultures, but also even from India, the Asian nation. And so it's a fantastic book, and I want to just identify a couple of quick highlights. Some of the writers were writers I was familiar with, B.S. Naipaul, Derek Walcott, of course, both won Nobel Prizes. But there's a few that were new to me who I'm certainly going to be searching out more of their works. And so we have a story from Naipaul, Man or Man from 1959, that deals with kind of a character who's sort of like this quirky character in a village that nobody really wants to associate with, and then leads to a fairly dark climax that reminded me a little bit of The Gospel According to Mark by Jorge Borges, and I might do a video comparing those stories. But there's also a story by Harold Sonny Ledoux, The Quiet Peasant, and then from the more recent stories, Elizabeth Nunez, who's written who's published a number of novels, has a story, The Town of Tears, which provided a really intense, woman's perspective on some sort of more the noir aspects. And then 2 absolutely fantastic stories in the final section, Songster by Jennifer Rahim from 2002, and The Dragonfly's Tale by Sharon Millar from 2013. And both of those were excellent in terms of dealing with more like noirish aspects of, crime stories in which there's violence, but also the violence and the crime is not the point of the story. The point of the story is the aspects of culture and society that the crime illuminates. And they really just, they hammer as stories, but they also make you think, they get under the skin all the way to the mind. I do want to read a couple of lines from Eric Roach's Homestead, which is a poem, and it's a really good poem. So, 7 splendid cedars break the trades from the thin gables of my house. 7 towers of song when the trades rage through their full green season foliage. But weathers veer, the drought returns, the sun burns emerald to ochre, and thirsty winds strip the boughs bare. Then they are tragic stands of sticks, pitiful and pitiless noons, and where dusk's buskin and the moons. And north beyond them lie the fields, which one man labored his life's days. One man, wearying his bone, shaped them as monuments in stone, hammered them with iron will, and a rugged, earthy courage, and going, left me heritage. Is labor lovely for a man that drags him daily into earth? Returns no fragrance of him forth. The man is dead, but I recall him in my voluntary verse. His life was unadorned as bread. He reckoned weathers in his head, and wore their ages on his face, and felt their keenness to his bone, the sting of sun and whip of rain. He read the day's event from the dawn, and saw the quality of morning through the sunset mask of evening. And it continues on. And again, this really just is a fantastic book. I highly, highly recommend it. In terms of a couple of other works that reminded me of, The Black God's Drums, which I read by P. Djeli Clark last month, had a couple of characters from Trinidad and kind of, mentioned aspects of the culture that this book really starts to expand on and illuminate in so many interesting ways. There are a number of the stories are written with the sort of the dialect or the dialogue or even the narration in sort of the more regional vernacular in a way somewhat similar to how Zora Neale Hurston, juxtaposes really thoughtful prose with then a dialogue that is so much more authentic to what the characters would speak. I mentioned, of course, The Gospel According to Mark by Jorge Luis Borges. One of his stories I don't find too many people discussing, but a phenomenal story nonetheless. And, in terms of where I would rank this is one of Akashic Books published famously their various city noir collections, going on about 20 years now, and starting with Brooklyn. And then they realized, wait a second, those were all, stories and works written specifically for the collection. What they started doing then was, Manhattan Noir 2, the classics, or San Francisco Noir 2, the classics. And these then were collections of stories that had previously been published, set in that locale, and usually by writers who had spent some time living there, or currently live there. And Trinidad Noir, the classics, does the same thing. These are all stories written by people who are either native to Trinidad and Tobago or who have spent a good portion of their lives there. And so, in terms of where it fits in with those collections, it's one of the better ones in terms of my reading. It's up there with Manhattan and San Francisco, somewhere above, I'll say, Boston, Brooklyn, the Los Angeles Noir 2 collection. So I highly recommend giving this book a shot. I think it surprised me with a couple of new writers, Jennifer Rahim and Sharon, as I mentioned, and it's worth taking a look at. So I hope everybody's doing well, and let me know if you've read this or if you're familiar with any of the writers. So thanks everybody. Bye.